Full Contact. In association with Mitsubishi Motors, drive your ambition.
Hello and welcome to Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph and Mitsubishi Motors. Only 7 months after it was due to finish the longest Six Nations in history. It's finally over. Congratulations to England, who were crowned champions after securing a bonus point win over Italy. Pretty uninspiring first half from Eddie Jones' side, but he said afterwards that he was proud of his players and lifting a third Six Nations title in 5 years wasn't a bad achievement. We'll be discussing the fallout from the win in Rome, and we'll be looking ahead to England's up-and-coming autumn series, starting with the visit of Georgia in 2 weeks. Was a Six Nations to forget for Wales from champions. They had their worst tournament since 2007, finishing in 5th. Their defeat at home to Scotland made it 5 in a row under new coach Wayne Pivac, and 7 defeats in their last 8 games. Former fly half James Hook will be joining us to dissect their tournament and look at what he thinks needs to change for Pivac if he is to remain in charge. We'll also round off the Six Nations action with that entertaining finale in Paris where the French halfbacks ran amok and stole the show but just fell short of lifting the trophy. We'll also be hearing from the head coach of the British and Irish Lions, Warren Gatland, who's been speaking with the Telegraph about the tour and some of the players he's keeping an eye on. And as ever, we'll be answering your questions and we'll be taking a closer look at some of the work being done at grassroots level during the last 7 months as part of the Mitsubishi Volunteer Recognition Programme. Alongside me today is the former Fiji Sevens coach, and you can never take this away from the man. He's an Olympic gold medalist. Hello, Ben.
Hey, it's good to be here. Lots of rugby to chat about.
Yes, well, let's talk about England-Italy. England 34, Italy 5. They did what was necessarily a fairly uneven performance, wasn't it? A bit lacklustre, but apart from Ben Young's man of the match performance, who, you know, I can't help feeling that it showed very much that this was the first run out for a side. If they'd had a warm-up game, and they would have had a warm-up game, apart from the idiot barbarians who called it off, then a lot of those things, you know, the slightly mistimed runs, the passes that just don't go there, a lot of that evens itself out. It was very much that to me.
Yeah, a little bit the same. And I think we couldn't quite see on telly, but I don't think the conditions were brilliant. And Italy, you know, were making it a bit of a pain for England. But first half wasn't great. There was just a bit of an over-reliance on the kicking game, perhaps. And they seemed to be either going very narrow or going to the air or going high. And the highlight for me, was Ben's performance. I thought he was brilliant and shows, you know, he's just a wonderful player and he's got another 3 or 4 years easily.
Well, that's interesting. I was going to come on to that. The 100th cap. Is he still the best scrum half? This is what concerns me. Not necessarily his form at the moment, or maybe Simmons or whatever, is the fact that there doesn't seem to be a defined succession plan here. I can't discern one. Now, there's obviously a lot of time to go before 2023, if we take that as a marker, but it's not clear to me. Is it to you?
I think he's going to go on the normal line, really, that Eddie says is he'll be picking on form, and so in the Premiership, that's how he's going to look at it. I think Ben's, you know, not just a steady 9 to be playing at there, though. He's just got a good all-round court game, really, and he's been there and done it. And I think with Leicester as well next season, they won't have as bad a season as they had.
Well, if they do, they're going to be in big trouble.
I can see. I think they'll move up the tables, and I think Ben will be a big part of that, and that will give him even more ammunition as far as his experiences for helping to lead England over the next few years. So yeah, it was an average performance by England, but they did what they needed to do. And like you said, they didn't have a lot of time together beforehand. It's just weird, full stop, isn't it?
The whole thing is weird. No fans and so on. I mean, did you think after the game that would be enough?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I had no doubt France would beat Ireland, and they went into that game wanting to win the game, not necessarily chase it. And I think that's important for France at the moment, is to gain momentum. Look, if they hadn't had the red card against Scotland, I really don't think we'd be talking about England as champions. It would have been France.
No, you're right there. We'll go on to discuss the relative merits of the top two finishers later on. But England have got an autumn series now. The game against Georgia first, then Ireland and Wales. What do you think you would like to see? What would Eddie Jones want to see from the side?
I think in the next game against Georgia, I'd like to see him change it up a little bit and test that depth out, and I think that's really important. Give guys some confidence and put them in the matchday squad, and then from there start to see where the team is at. I think we probably all want to see a slightly more expansive game, but if they're winning, not many people are, certainly if you're an England supporter, are going to complain about the style of play. I suppose the longer question is their style of play when they play against the South Africans and the New Zealand sides, is that style going to be good enough against them? And the answer might be yes. And we, but at the moment, I suppose as a supporter, I'd like to just see them put their hands through it a little bit more. I'd like to see Henry Slade playing at 13. I think he's a terrific player, and I think they could use him there with more of a direct 12.
And lest we forget, we had the captain of England's women, Sarah Hunter, on last week. Congratulations to them. Back-to-back Grand Slams, not easy to do. Bit of carping around people saying, well, there are other teams that are not professional. Well, that's not their fault. It's for the other unions to get their act together and to fund that part of the game, which is the one which can grow fastest in all of all the things. And to me, and I'll keep going on about this, it will underpin the long-term health of the men's game. It's very necessary. Congratulations to England women. Outstanding. Now let's turn our attention to Wales. Their defeat to Scotland was the first time they've lost at home to them for 18 years. It wasn't a great game either. To help us with this, we've got the former Welsh fly half and regular contributor. It's nice to speak to Ian. James Hook's on the line. Hello, James.
Hey, Brian, you okay, mate?
Yeah, not bad. Yes, no one wants to sack coaches. I mean, you don't want to get into the, you lose 2 or 3 games or whatever. But I know that there is proper concern down in Wales, not just because of the number of defeats, but the seemingly lack of spark within those. What's your feeling? What's your feedback? From around there.
Yeah, I think it is obviously a lot of frustration and disappointment. I think the first game against Italy, Pivac's first game in the Six Nations, it was a great win against Italy, 40 odd points, and they looked to play some great rugby, but I think since that game, I think we've probably been caught between sort of Gatland's game plan and Pivac's game plan. And, let's not forget, Gatland's reign was obviously so successful. There's a lot of players still in that squad who will probably play in the way Gatland, wanted to play. And they've got to sort of adapt quickly now to Pivac's plans. So, it's hugely frustrating, particularly on the weekend. I think we lost the battle of the breakdown. We gave far too many penalties away and just couldn't get on the front foot and get that momentum and phases going. I don't think we went past 5 or 6 phases the whole game.
Well, Josh Adams, he's urged the Welsh fans to stick by Pivac, show patience and so on. You talked about the two styles. Can you perhaps put some more definition into this? I'm not exactly sure what Pivac's style is. Is he trying to play the way he was with club side, or is it something different? What do you think it is? Because I haven't quite been able to nail that down for myself.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's trying to play, when he got the job, being Scarlett's coach along with Stephen Jones, they played with a lot of wit and, they had a lot of success from it. But, I suppose you've got to be able to adapt as well. And you take the game the weekend, it wasn't a game really for playing, running rugby. And we probably lacked the ball carriers to get over the gain line. So we have to adapt to conditions. And I think Scotland did that a lot better. And, I think everyone wants to see running rugby. It's great to watch, but we have to be able to, sort of play different styles depending on the conditions and the opposition.
Hey James, Ben Ryan here. I hope you're well.
Hiya Ben.
I'm interested to hear what you think about the upcoming Autumnation Games and whether you think it should be a chance to test fringe players, or do you think there's a little bit of pressure internally and externally to stick with their best side to become must-win games? How do you see that?
Yeah, that's a tough one, obviously, because Wales now is 0 from 5, and I think for us, the Welsh management, they just really want to win a game, and it's not going to be any easier against Ireland away. But at the same time, like you say, they've got to see what sort of youngsters we got coming through and give boys like Louis Rees-Zammit an opportunity. I think he will get an opportunity, but it's a case of winning some games as well because they are under pressure. But yeah, it's a tough one. I think they will experiment a little bit, particularly against Georgia. But first and foremost, I think they'll go with their strongest outfit against Ireland away in Dublin, just to try and get that win and get that confidence in the squad.
All right, James, let's go on to what is a great high note. Your former teammate, Alan Wynne-Jones, world record number, 149 caps. It is obviously incredible. We don't need to say any more about that. But how long do you actually think he has left, wants to go on?
Yeah, like you said, it's an incredible achievement. But I think he'll definitely be eyeing up this Lions tour in the summer. He'll obviously want to get on the tour. He'll want to play in the test. But I think, I don't think he'll look past that. He's broken the cap record. Whether he gets 150, 160 caps, that won't matter. I think he'll want to finish his career out in South Africa, with the Lions. His first Lions tour was out in South Africa, and what a way to finish. Like I say, whether he gets a test spot, remains to be seen. But I think he'll go on that tour just because of his experience, and whether he just becomes a midweek captain. As long as he keeps himself fit and healthy, I think he'll go. And like I say, he brings a lot of experience to that squad.
Just a final question, James. Obviously, things are not clicking at the moment. From your point of view, is this a case of it's nearly there, or are there genuine concerns about whether they will get where they want to go and know actually where they're going?
Well, the last two performances, they're not really nearly there. I think they haven't really strung to, like I say, more than 5 or 6 phases together. So I think, you've got to look as well. They're missing sort of Josh Navidi, who was massive for them, particularly at the breakdown. Tipuric pulled out last minute against Scotland. In the last game. Ken Owens is missing. Moriarty was missing, and these are big players for Wales, experienced players who know how to win. So without making excuses, we sort of missed those boys. And Jonathan Davis, who's played the last 2 games, but he's been out for the best part of a year. So perhaps we're expecting a little bit too much from him. A little bit too early. He needs a little bit more time to settle back in. In terms of performances, we're not really there, but I think the boys know what they can do, and they just got to work hard and just keep going at it. We've all been there, boys, in tough times, and you just got to try and get that one win from somewhere, no matter how it comes, and that obviously builds confidence within the squad.
James, it's always great to speak to you. Thanks very much. You come on lockdown before we do, so you can have a party. Social distance party, obviously, but there you go, mate. It's great to speak to you. Thanks, mate.
Pleasure, boys. Take care.
Cheers.
Ben, a quick word with Scotland. Look, the game was awful. From a Scottish point of view, I think their control in second half was quite impressive. And I think if you've been one of their fans, who cares whether all the neutrals are entertained? You'll be happy with that. Gregor Townsend mentioned that Adam Hastings and Finn Russell are competing for the 10 shirt. Do you see any way, a bit like Ford and Farrell, they could accommodate them both?
No, I don't. Not unless you play Adam at fullback. I think Finn is going to be playing at 10 or nowhere, and I think Adam hasn't got the wheels perhaps to play at 13. And at 12, Scotland are looking for a slightly different type of player, a bit more of a harder ball carrier. So I don't see that happening. It's good. It's great they've got 2 players in the same position that gives them a bit more depth. And I thought they were great. The conditions were awful. People like Richie are really shining at the moment, and you saw a togetherness there that they wanted to get past after their failure in the World Cup.
I tell you what, they stopped doing. They stopped being bullied. Up front, if they're absolute first choice 8 weren't there, in particular front 5, then they used to be in trouble. But it's not the case anymore. The depth in the front row, prop, and that's encouraging, because that's always been one of their problems.
Yeah, and look, they're always going to struggle from a small player base. They've got the advantage of having Glasgow and Edinburgh. They've got also links up with MLR team in Washington and one down in Nice in France. So they're doing what they can to provide as many opportunities for Scottish qualified players. But they're always going to have that small amount of players, and so he's got to make sure that he gets every ounce out of them, and they never take that backward step. I think he's done a terrific job. I think Gregor's weathered the storms and and probably the criticism he received at the World Cup. And I think a lot of it wasn't down to him, and he's a terrific coach, and he's got a real opportunity now to build on their 4th place in the Six Nations.
Let's discuss, because there's been journalists saying France were far better. Now, if you look at the Six Nations tournament as a whole, it's so long ago, the first part of it, I think people have forgotten actually what happened. But if you go back and read what England actually was starting to be the coming team. They were starting to play really well. They had break like everyone else. They didn't have a warm-up game. They stuttered a bit. France played quite well. Now, you're involved with France in various ways. I think I can see what Fabien Galtier is trying to do, what his coaches are trying to do. I don't think they're that far off. Out of sort of 10, where do you think they are on the 2023 curve?
Oof. I think you're right. And the Six Nations has been really interesting from that point of view, because I was in Paris for that opening game, and it was Galtier and Sean Edwards' first one, and there was a real feel good about them. And they were only just beginning that journey, but that enthusiasm and that feeling amongst everyone that this was a new chapter, I think was a part of that victory in Paris at the start. And then they had that aberration against Scotland. They then started to put together the jigsaw around a pivotal halfback pairing of Dupont and Tomac, and they will stay because they are the best halfbacks in France, but they also have a good understanding with each other, and they've got longevity now. They won't just be there for the next year or two.
France have got probably 4 or 5 scrum halves. Sarah, and then the 2 Racing scrum halves who were good, really
terrific
good,
players.
Nowhere near.
Yeah, I think France are blessed in that category, and they've got they're always
the number 10s are very young, though, aren't they? All 3 of them.
They are, but they're not going to be afraid to chuck them into top games and playing top 14 all the time. And I think, look, I don't think anyone's ever going to argue that France will always put together a decent backline. And they've got a lot of young Frenchmen playing in the top 14 at the moment. I think then when you look at Aldrit and the back row, they've started to get a nicer blend there. And their set piece, as we talked about, has become better. There is still some inconsistencies around the cards. I think there's bigger problems to sort out, which is the domestic competition and the home and away attitude that still pervades the top 14. That's definitely an issue, as is the intensity of training at top 14 is nowhere near the level of what we see here in England at club level, and that does roll into their test window, and so when they're trying to prepare, I think more than any of the home of the Six Nations, the French team have the most catch up from a fitness and conditioning point of view coming into national camps.
How is that possible in a professional era? How has that been allowed to happen?
I think look, there are some clubs that are getting it right. Clermont, Montpellier, Racing, Lyon to an extent. They have got some good people behind the scenes. They do seem to have the home and away, and there's a cultural thing around that.
Can we just explain this? Because, well, look, my view of it, certainly 15 years ago, it was almost an unwritten rule. You win at home, you don't try as much away, and the home side goes berserk in front of their town crowd. Yeah. And that was just accepted as it is. Can there still be that in a professional top 14?
There 100% still is that. I don't think it's as black and white as that now, but there is certainly still a feeling that when you're at home, and most of the clubs still in the top 14 are not the big city clubs. We've got the exceptions in Paris, but most of them are villages and large towns, and they want to protect their home ground. It is as simple as that. And it's not just about when going away and it doesn't matter as much. It's part of the allure of French rugby, I think. You do see the ups and downs. I think the club game and the home and away is part of that. But also, it's not just that. It's if they don't think away is as important, then there is the whole week build-up is perhaps not to the same intensity. That just means that your season isn't as structured from a conditioning and a fitness point of view, which means that when they get to the international scenario, that the coaches know that they can't quite push it as hard as they want to because of the fitness base. That is changing. Undoubtedly, that's changing. They've changed their sports science staff in France. With the national side, they're making some moves there. And they have a very clear goal of 2023 and 2024 Olympic Games. And they see, Olympic gold medal for men's and women's sevens. They see a World Cup win in 2023. And everything is driving towards that.
They need to cut this, though, don't they? To me, I can clearly see the Sean Edwards influence. I think there's a bigger desire for them when they defend. The big forwards are getting up off the floor, making the ground better and so on. There's a hunger for that. But there's a looseness around their play. and an ill discipline, like not just the slapping the ball into touch, that was a spur of the moment thing, but there are other bits. For example, in and around the breakdowns, at any one time in games, they fire in, and if you look carefully, several times, there are no arms and so on, and they're only one quick TMO away from a red or a yellow, or many times, and. The difference between them and England in that sense is England are disciplined like that. Yeah. They don't have as much natural flair, I don't think, and so on. But they don't do that. And if you can't eradicate that, however wonderful their attacking prowess, and it is, they can score lots of tries quickly and from improbable situations, you're always going to keep the other side, good teams, with something in the game. Against Ireland, had Ireland, played with their usual accuracy and so on, they might not have won that game.
Going back to that point around the breakdown. For me, when I look at that, I see what's happening with the officials in England, and I see how sharper they are on breakdown and what they do with your hands and what's legal and what's not. And in France, there's more lax around that. Now, I have seen from afar Sean working very hard on making it very obvious about what they're doing with their arms to reduce exactly what you're saying. But he then will have some frustration that they go back into the clubs and they're allowed to get away with things. And as you know, if you can get away with it, then you will. But when you get to the test arena, that's not possible.
Well, surely the French Federation are capable of saying to their top 14 referees, listen, this is a problem for us. And actually, you're not refereeing it properly either. Sort yourself out.
It's an excellent point. I think for me that would be, it's not just about what they're doing as players. It's about what the officials are doing. So yeah, 100% agree. That's something that they should be going to their referees and having a much harder line on.
The Ireland performance. I mean, I think what would have disappointed Andy Farrell most is the fact that Ireland's accuracy, legendary over Joe Schmidt, carrying on so on, in terms of things like set piece, not losing those. The drives usually from lineouts are usually spot on, very difficult to stop. 4 lineouts are lost in a row. Then they went backwards in a scrum, and then a couple of minutes later they missed a penalty kick to touch. Now, you don't usually want to lose 4 lineouts in a game, but if you lose 4 in a row, you can never establish momentum. And they kept doing this, and I couldn't discern why. They had lots of conferences. Ryan was talking and still didn't go. It wasn't just the hooker's fault. It was an all-round thing. I'm almost tempted to say it was an aberration, won't happen again, but I'm concerned that it happened at all, actually.
I agree with you. Like, you get a number of those red flag moments. They build up, you lose momentum, and you normally concede points. And that happened with Ireland. Look, they've got a smart coach in Farrell. They've got a good coaching staff, and they've got some very wily players in key positions there. Some of which you could argue haven't got that much time left in the test arena. Yeah, I think Sexton's a good example.
He wasn't very happy about being brought off, was he?
No, he wasn't, and I can see that he's absolutely, he gives it all he. It's going back to the Alan Wynne-Jones one as well. It's such a difficult art as a coach and selector to get those players when you know they've got so much experience. You know that in your back of your memory are some of their startling performances, but perhaps in recent times they're not quite as good. They're not like a guy coming in on a few caps where they get dropped and then they get back in on form. You drop a big star like that now, you're almost saying, okay, that's it.
Who is the backup? Byrne. I mean, Byrne's there, but I mean,
probably, yeah.
You haven't seen him being given much exposure and so on. And I said at the time, look, I know he's unhappy, but it just wasn't working. He wasn't able to play off that solid platform, and because of that, his game was affected. And I thought, we might as well just throw the dice. I mean, see what happens. In the end, it didn't work either. But I don't want to make too much of this because let's be fair. This season has been so atypical. To try and draw conclusions is a very, very difficult thing. But at one time, Ireland had loads and loads of depth. Do you think that's still there all round in the squad at the moment, or are they just searching a bit?
I think there is the depth there, and you look at what's happening progression coming through from age group. They're even dipping into sevens now. They've got 3 guys that have played test match stuff involved in the squad in the last couple of weeks that have come from their sevens team, which didn't even exist 3 or 4 years ago. So I think their pathways are in place and they're strong. And I think you're right. Let's not read too much into this. They've got a good group. It has been just a weird season. There's been so many stops and starts. So it's inevitable that we're going to see kind of some misfiring at the moment, and I think all 5 nations particularly have got some very positive things to take out of what they're trying to do on very different levels. I certainly think there's no knee jerk. I think all the staff for all those teams should be kept in place, and now they've got this great opportunity to have a run of games in this 8 nations.
I'll tell you one thing that people perhaps haven't factored in: lockdowns affect people in different ways. Now, they're in camp and so on, so you could argue it's the same as normal, but it's not quite, is it? Because they don't have the interaction and so on with outside people, and some people don't react well to that.
Yeah, they don't, and like these bubbles is just weird. Some of the work I do in football, I'm seeing it as well, and it's just a full stop. It's a funny time, hard to maintain momentum off the field as well, because you've got so much stop-start stuff as around as testing and all the various protocols, that it doesn't feel like you're in a flowing environment off the field. So it's no surprise, really. We're seeing stop-start stuff on the field, and hopefully in the next 6 months some of this will be behind us. And
just a final point, one of the great things about team sport is the vicarious pleasure, thrills and so on that you get when you win, and not just intra-squad, but when you are celebrating, like Exeter, a double win without your fans, that is I'm not saying they're not pleased to have done it, but it takes the edge off things, doesn't it? Because you, as a player, you thrive on that. You've seen this as a coach and a player. It helps you, brings you through things when things are difficult. It's a feeling you can rely on. When it's not there, it must be it never happened to me, but it must be very, very strange.
Yeah, and look, I don't think we're suddenly saying that the poor old pro rugby players. That's not where we're going with this. We're just saying that it is very difficult for them, and so we shouldn't be judging on face value what we're seeing on the field, because there's lots of other mitigating factors on a whole range of things, both individual and team and international, that means that we're just going to see performances that perhaps don't make a whole heap of sense at the moment.
Full Contact, in association with Mitsubishi Motors. Everyone's ambitions are different. You can climb to the top, or you could take on uphill battles of a different kind. You can explore for hundreds of miles, or you could begin a bigger journey. You can make time fly, or you could make it stand still. The Mitsubishi SUV range. Drive your ambition.
Well, in partnership with England Rugby, Mitsubishi Motors runs the Volunteer Recognition Programme to provide the rugby community with opportunities to recognise and reward the volunteers who are the heartbeat of the grassroots game. Throughout the autumn, in association with Mitsubishi, I will be chatting with a selection of rugby volunteers to hear their stories and shine a light on the brilliant work they've done during these most challenging of times. My guest for the second instalment is Gary Morgan from Liverpool Collegiate RUFC. Hello, Gary.
Hello, Brian. How are you?
Yeah, I'm bad. No, good to speak to you. How long have you been involved with Liverpool Collegiate?
For as long as I can remember, Brian. I was brought up on the sidelines watching the first team by my father, who was a former player. He'd finished playing by the time I was old enough to stand on the sideline, so I used to go every Saturday, watch the boys play. And then as soon as I was old enough, I put a kit on and started playing myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, this is germane to me, the Cauliflower Ear programme. I've got 2. Can you tell us a bit more about what that means?
Yeah. I'm currently chairman of Collegiate Rugby Club, and I've also, thanks to the RFU, done a couple of courses, which is the Leadership Academy and the Leadership in Union, which the RFU ran to develop administrators of the game, which was a good investment by the RFU. I got invited on to a subcommittee of the Lancashire main board as a volunteer coordinator, and from that I then got invited on to the main board as a Rugby Safe lead. And I'm not sure if you were the key points of Rugby Safe when I joined for the RFU were things like Activate, which is the warm-up activity, head case around concussion, first aid provision. But I wanted to add something else for Lancashire, so I looked at an area that was kind of missing in the county, which was mental health support, and came up with the kind of catchy idea of the cauliflower ear. And the catchphrase is always there to lend the cauliflower ear, to try and raise awareness of mental health within rugby clubs, take away the stigma, and basically just start conversations, so people can ask their mates in the club, are they all right?
So we're going to go on to that. You say that the club supporting the mental health and emotional well-being. What does that mean in practical terms?
In practical terms, what we've put in place as a county is we've engaged a group called Acorn Emotional Wellbeing, who are a couple of professional counsellors who provide support to anyone who needs it. It's fully funded by Lancashire County, and they provide one-to-one counselling sessions with people who may need support. So that's currently done by video call, telephone call, or email, given the current climate that we can't do face-to-face stuff. And the whole point was to try and get clubs, if they identified someone within the club who needed help, to give them an outlet of where to go. So to signpost people in the direction of the ladies at Acorn who can give a bit more specific support.
How can people avail themselves of this? Is there a website you want to give us?
Yeah, acornwellbeing.com or counselling@acornwellbeing.com.
Okay.
Is the email address. And this is, as I say, Jules and Sarah started off doing this with Durham County Rugby Club, or Durham County Rugby. And when I came along, I wanted to do something with Lancashire. I looked around what support there was, came across what Durham had done, and engaged Sarah and Jules up there, went across to meet them in Leeds, had a chat about what they wanted to do, what we wanted to do, and it all came together quite well, to be honest.
Well, that's tremendous. It's not just the mental and emotional well-being that's been challenged with the grassroots game, is it? The actual format of the game, what you're allowed to do now. I've heard some worrying stories from some junior clubs about the measures that are in place at the moment to get some form of rugby played are not proving too attractive to some club members. How's it been with you?
No, it's extremely difficult. So I've got to be honest, and I'm very worried about grassroots rugby. All we can do is train at the moment, and we've been pre-season training now for over 2 months, which is the guys kind of lose interest. And also, you've got to make them feel safe. So part of what I do is go down, take temperatures of players as they arrive, make sure everyone's hand sanitised as much as they can do, make sure the equipment's sanitised. But there is a great worry, and as a chairman of a rugby club, not too far in the too distant future, we were running 4 teams. At the end of last season, we were running 2 teams. When we're actually allowed to pick up a rugby ball again and play competitive rugby, I'm not sure what players are going to be available, whether they've moved on, found different things to do, because there is no light at the end of the tunnel as far as I can see at the moment for grassroots rugby. And it is a great concern, I'm sure, not just for myself and collegiate, but other rugby clubs as to, are these people going to come back and pick up a rugby ball in the future? Well,
Gary, that's mirroring what I've heard. None of us have a solution at the moment. It's not even in our hands. So let's hope that we can all ride this storm. Look, it's great to speak to you. Cauliflower Ear programme, again, just to remind you, keep up the good work. Try and keep the spirits up. I know it's really difficult, but if we don't have people like you doing that, then we're in even more trouble. So it's great to speak to you.
Thanks, Brian.
Good
Great
man.
Speaking to you too.
And for more details about the Mitsubishi Motors Volunteer Recognition Programme with England Rugby, you can visit www.englandrugby.com/participation/volunteers. Amidst all the chaos of last year, it's easy to forget that we are actually coming into a Lions year in 2021, and the head coach, Warren Gatland, was speaking to the Telegraph last week following the launch of the tour jersey. He told Telegraph's Ben Coles that he is open to selecting players who are omitted from the national side, citing Exeter's duo Joe and Sam Simmons as examples.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if they're playing as well as they have this year, and what they've achieved as a club over the last 10 years, and making finals, their biggest step up was performing in Europe, and they've done that. They've won the European Cup. I went and watched that game, and they were very, very strong up front. Particularly, I thought Joe he controlled the game extremely well. Obviously, his goal kicking, his leadership's been outstanding. Look, we're not against picking players because they're not in an international team. And the thing about England is just because players aren't in there at the moment doesn't mean that they won't potentially be in the Six Nations. Eddie does have a huge amount of depth and quality players to be able to pick from, and lots of different combinations. And so, when you look at England as a base, there are potentially, some players that may not be in the squad that you may consider. And we've spoken about players in the past about that. And as I mentioned right from the start, selection is just a matter of opinion, and that's all it is. And I look at the Wales squad that was selected for a few weeks ago. There's probably a few players that I thought were unlucky to miss out, and a couple of players that were in the squad that I may not have picked. But that's, I'm not the coach and the selector. So you look, what they've achieved has been absolutely fantastic. To do the double, knowing how hard that is, when you've obviously won a European competition, then to back it up the following week. And they did it differently. I thought Watts did a great job in stopping them close to the line in terms of negating I know the weather conditions had a little bit to do with it, but negating their maul and their pick and go stuff. And then they changed the way that they approached it and took the 3 points, something that they haven't been doing in the past. They've always, gone to the corner. So they were smart in the way that they were able to adapt, to the weather conditions and keep the scoreboard ticking over. And that's definitely leadership out there, and guys doing well. And a couple of guys, in the squad probably consider themselves unlucky that they are not in the England squad. But like I said to you, I'm not the selector, but performances over the next 6 months or so we'll be keeping an eye on a number of players.
He mentioned Joe Simmons there as a potential Lion. Ben, were you surprised to see him left out of Eddie Jones' squad?
Well, I think the caveat here is that we've got these next round of games, and I think we could see both of those being put into the squad. So it's happened before, hasn't it? Where a player that's kind of one of the form players has been left out, and then you see 2 weeks later he's been put in. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Eddie gives those two a run at some point. It'd be great as well, because they need to, if there's any doubts on whether they can make the step up, well, let's have a look.
Well, that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can postulate all you like, you won't know until you give them a chance. Warren was also talking about his coaching setup, and he says he won't be selecting Rob Howley for obvious reasons, which is a shame. But he did mention Rob Baxter is on his radar. What do you make of that?
I think it's nice. I think it's great that he's can see that what wonderful things Rob's done over the last few years at Exeter, and he's not only a fantastic director of rugby, he's a great forwards coach, and he has been on international tours. England have taken him away before, and I see nothing wrong with it. It's not even a curveball, because Rob's now got the resume, hasn't he, to back it up with Premiership and European titles. So I think it's nice that those guys get a mention, and I hope he's looking outside of that.
And it's very much like players, isn't it? As we've just said, unless you put a coach in, how do you know? Everyone can have their own theories about he hasn't got this or he has got that. How do you know?
Well, exactly. And I think a blend's good, particularly in the coaching setup, because if you're an international coach, it's very different. You are not day to day unless you're in camp. Whereas, the club coaches that have been, in the mix every day, their coaching knife is sharp. They are ready to go in and will thrive in that. And I think someone like that, I think Rob, where he doesn't have perhaps some of the other senior responsibilities, he's certainly worth considering. Yeah, and he's a proven winner at the moment, and he's got he's a very solid bloke on and off the field. I think he'd be a great addition if they do go down that road. Maybe
a bit early, and given the context we're in, very difficult anyway to judge for various reasons, and many of which we've previously discussed. Test certainties, Alan Wynne-Jones as captain?
I don't know if I can. Yeah, I mean, that is it'd be interesting to see how Alan goes in the next couple of months. I mean, I know that he's had 148 occasions where you can judge him on that as well. But I think you need to go on form. Maro Itoje as well must be in the mix there. I think for a conversation, for my mind anyway. And I think certainties as well. I'd love to see a Curry and a Tipperick in the back row together if you can somehow get that blend.
Hogg at fullback.
Yeah, Hoggy for me would be the number one fullback at the moment, and at the moment the halfbacks would be the current England ones. But I think there would be some competition for sure. I think Finn, if once he gets a couple more games under his belt, I can imagine that it would be Youngs and Russell for me. But there's lots of options, aren't there? We have got a terrific pool of players in Britain, and with the coaching staff that he's going to be putting together, it's a very formidable team that's going to go across.
I mean, I when I'm asked to do this so far out, and it is still, I mean, I know it's next year, but there's such a lot of rugby to go. I always say, look, it's pointless. It's pointless doing this. You can say what you like. You don't know who'll be fit, who'll be on form, who'll be picked, and so on and so on and so on. I mean, if you want to have the entertaining debate, then fine. But it really does depend, because I've experienced this, and I've seen it so many times. The form in the last few months overshadows nearly everything. You can have a CV this wide, and as you said, you might get you a squad place, but when they're looking at the test places and so on, it is very much on form. It is very much like that. So
you're right, Brian. It's just conjecture at the moment, like you said, and So it's nice to throw this around, because it always adds to well, no longer barroom conversations, but conversations on Zoom. But you're right. I mean, and I'm sure there'll be players that we haven't even talked about that will be in those matchday squads.
Okay, let's finish off with some questions from listeners. Nigel, can rugby survive as a sport when refereeing is essentially impossible? The referee has enormous influence on the game, especially in comparison to other sports.
Well, first thing we need to do that we don't currently do is actually observe the law book. We have a set of laws, lots of them, and then some of them are so grey that it makes it even harder for referees and for
some of them aren't grey and they're still ignored. So
I mean, we have to go back and have a proper look at that, not just have a knee-jerk around breakdown and various laws. We need to look at all of that and say what's in, what's out, and make it absolutely clear globally.
Regarding Lions 2021, we've talked about, should selection balance shift from Wales to Scotland?
We've just kind of talked about this, haven't we? But I do think they've got some world-class players. We talked about Finn and Hoggy, and Richie, I think, will be coming through, and they've got some very good players. But it's all going to be down to how everyone's playing in a few months' time.
Yeah. I mean, look, if Wales get their act together, then it goes back. Point taken. Danny, why does it take so long to set a scrum up today? Even watching games from the noughties, it was quicker. The 90s were supersonic. The 80s, you said, didn't say, but even quicker. God, I'm sick of talking about this. It's very simple. When you gave referees the responsibility of setting the scrum, they're not, understandably, want to get it right. They're very scared of being criticised for injuries and so on and so on. It takes forever. It needn't do. They could get people down a lot quicker. They could disallow the white smoke conversations that are like papal, choices before each one. And they could simply say, look, it's your put-in. If you're not ready in X seconds, 30 seconds, like the clock in American football, when you have to get a snap off in time, you lose the put-in. I tell you what, they'd be down like a shot.
I think you've summed it up. I think it's definitely something that could be improved. It just needs to come from a. Unfortunately, all these things you have to get some sort of notice from above that this is what we're now making a focus on, and then it gets sorted, then something else, and then something else.
And I mentioned this on it was absolutely apparent in the French Ireland game. Had France been a bit more cynical and kept going, they could have run about 4 minutes off a 10-minute clock for a sin bin just on one scrum. You're able to do that because a referee doesn't necessarily know who's at fault for not going down, not quite in there. And in a close game, he doesn't want to choose because he'd be criticised for being partial or whatever. And players, you take advantage of that. And
it's common that, though. I mean, that's actually trained and that's protocol. If you get yellow cards, then the opportunities to wear the clock down are probably at its greatest from penalties to line-outs and from scrums. So that's why they do it.
And Andy, a question, as I mentioned during commentary, should the watch be stopped for scrums? Well, as it is at present, I think it should be. The one caveat to that is this. If you do that, there is no incentive to get on with the scrum because they just say, well, it doesn't matter because the time's not being taken anyway. When you're watching as a neutral or whatever, when you're not having to commentate on it, and maybe you haven't got the ref link, it just goes on and on and on, and nothing's happening, literally. And that is a dull part of the game. They're talking about American football having loads of stops. It's getting a bit like that. And so I'm tempted to say absolutely, but I just know what will happen.
Yeah.
Everyone will just say, oh, fine, it doesn't matter because you get time back. But that's not the point because it's the spectacle that they're affected. And if they don't understand this, it's going to be a rude awakening because I'm not saying we'll lose. It'd be the deciding factor for losing spectators and viewers, but it's not helping. It's not helping,
and I think you're right to say it's not just about making that decision. So, agreeing with Andy and saying that what should be stopped without understanding the ramifications. And like you said, you know how that will be played out. And you could go down the roadway the last 10 minutes of each half, they stop the clock for scrums. But again, then we're just making the game more complicated, and we need to be doing the opposite of that.
But intellectually, though, Ben, look, the scrum in the first 10 minutes could be as equally important. You just don't know. So,
no, you don't.
Or why pick on the 10 there?
You're right.
Comes on to the last question now. By Martin alluded to this. How can the game be speeded up? Because now seems to be a lot of time stood about. He says rugby is slowly becoming American football, and the dynamics of it, of intense activity, I think it's about a minute, isn't it? Then you have the average is a minute on, 2 minutes off. That is getting more staccato. And I've said this many times. Why are players allowed to have conferences before lineouts, before scrums and so on, without referees doing it? I've seen one or two referees hurrying them up, and funnily enough, when they do, it does get quicker. So it can be done. And for me, the stop clock, you lose the throw into line out, lose the put in. Very simple. If you're not there, it goes over. And you know as well as I do, players are infinitely flexible. If they're required to do something, especially something they can do anyway, they will do. And they will do this.
Yeah, and we've seen it over the years where they've put different timings on various other things. I think the percentage in ball play has not really messed around too much in the last decade. It's still around that half, around that 50%, not a lot more. And actually, like the other versions of the game, like Sevens, it's no better. It's still about half, creeping up a little bit now. So I think we just need to be stricter on all of this. And you're right, unfortunately, we've got a game where you could go out to the kitchen, make a cup of tea, come back, and nothing's changed.
See, the ball in play to me is a slight red herring. I don't think without absolutely drastic change, and that would mean changing the face of the game, you are going to get a massive amount of more time. But that's not the point. The point is, in between time, if you're going to have that, then make sure it's over in X time, because then it comes quicker.
Yeah,
the ball in time goes quicker. You just don't want these gaps, especially where they're avoidable.
No, the overall game has got longer as far as all that dead
massively
time.
Longer.
Yeah, hugely, and that's again down to from on high starting to go harder on all of this stuff to make it much more stricter, because we've got no problem with the fitness levels of the players. It's not as though they really do need that time.
Well, and the number of substitutions they've got available to them.
Yeah,
but I would say, as with everything, the first step to curing it is admitting there's a problem. I'm not sure they even think it's a problem.
Well, I think they just need to sit down and watch some of these games on telly, don't they? Because you will see that, and we don't want that because there's so much good stuff that goes on. We don't want to see this game that, you know, and you don't want to paint a bleak picture. But in the conversations earlier, we talked about what's happening at the grassroots level, and in their throngs, they've moved to hockey and football and other sports in this lockdown period because of what's been going on. And we're going to lose a generation, and we can't then make that worse by having a product that's getting worse and some of these things, like you said, they're so correctable.
Well, that's all we have time for this week on Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph and Mitsubishi Motors. Thank you very much again to my co-host Ben Ryan and to all our guests. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe and check out some of our previous episodes and stay up to date on all things sport. Head to the telegraph.co.uk/contact, where listeners can get 30 days access to all Telegraph's premium sports coverage completely free. I'll be back next week as our attention switches to the up-and-coming Autumn International Series. Until then, it's goodbye.
Full Contact, in association with Mitsubishi Motors. Drive your ambition.